Welcome back, one and all, throughout time and space for this episode of Weebs on the Weekends, the podcast where we break down the anime news highlights of the week and give a retrospective look on an anime that premiered 10 years ago. Today's episode will cover our top 5 anticipated anime for the quickly approaching 2022 spring anime season, after which we will give our thoughts on whether to resurrect or rebury the 2012 anime franchise Kingdom. My name is Sam Martinez. I'm a part-time weeb, full-time automail mechanic, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Jay Johnson, part-time weeb, full-time English language sensei. Now, Jay, I feel like before we go into the anime seasons or the anime picks that we have for the 2022 spring anime season, we have to at least update our listeners slash viewers on our geeky happenings that we had done during our little break, siesta, hiatus. What are we going to, does it need a name? I don't know. The thing that we did before we're doing this episode.
Oh, just for me? Oh, yeah. So I want to talk about the Oscars real quick because I felt very nerdy. I didn't watch the Oscars because
all the memes.
yeah, but
I'm sorry. Go on.
just in the way of keeping it with the anime scene, I was very surprised that even in two categories specifically, the fan favorite moment and the animation categories for the Oscars, I was very surprised that this wasn't the year that the Oscars would have got on board with following the wave that was Demon Slayer, Mugen Train. And looking at we haven't won, we as the anime community haven't won an Oscar since 2001 or 2003 with Spirited Away. But given that the Oscars in Japan, the animation industry gave their Oscar award to Mugen Train, I was very surprised that Hollywood, given that they actually put a lot of budget and marketing into showing off Mugen Train in Los Angeles, Miami, Atlanta, New York. So I was very surprised that it didn't actually come up on the nominations list. I mean, there were movies like Encanto, which definitely deserved a spot. Luca. I don't know about the Mitchells versus the Machines.
That was one of the Netflix. That one was really good. I would say it's definitely it's a very good modern coming of age family get together. So a little bit like Goofy movie, but for a traditional family, not just for a single parent home.
Right. Yeah, it's just weird that they're giving a lot of credit to Netflix that has a studio or production company and not really giving it to a lot of other companies. Like Haruki Murakami's novel Drive My Car won Best Short Story, I believe. But even with the fan favorite moments, I would have thought the Rengoku versus Atsuka.
Oh yeah, the beefy monk with the tattoos.
Right, yeah, and I was surprised that it didn't come up because there was the Snyder Cut, there was the Spider-Man No Way Home moment, Army of the Dead is what won, but that was just really shocking. It's when is anime going to get its spotlight at the Oscars again? And Hayao Miyazaki's coming back for his next film this year. I think How Do You Go On Living or How Do You Live? I think that's so that might have a chance since it will be quote unquote his last film. But other than that, I caught up with all of Ranking of Kings. I actually watched My Dress Up Darling in the dub completely way through, and I have no reason to suspect that My Dress Up Darling is not going to make my end of the year best list. So that's how much I love that show. Caught up with some Bisco as well, and some other things. Finished up with Vanitas, and the last episode of Attack on Titan was pushed back to to April the 3rd because of the earthquake that shook Tokyo. Not Tokyo, but Sendai. So there was a lot that happened on the month that we've been gone.
So I guess just to touch back on the Oscars too, because you had mentioned it, I just gotten news recently that the Jujutsu Kaisen movie, because it was only here in the States for one day, which is complete bunk, and it's really bad too, because even for Demon Slayer, for as much marketing as that had gotten, it was only here for maybe 2-3 days. It wasn't here for a whole long time either. But apparently for Jujutsu Kaisen, for the one day that it was here in the States, it was able to hit the same box office numbers that Demon Slayer did. So I don't know if it's I don't know if it's because of like the same people that went to go see Demon Slayer are seeing Jujutsu Kaisen as well. It seemed like lightning sort of struck twice, but like for another anime, and it was just very different. And I want to say that maybe the reason why like Demon Slayer wasn't given its due in the Oscars is because, as you said before, the animated films that were mentioned. So like Mitchell's and the Machines. What was the other one that you mentioned?
Encanto, Lucas, and there's one more.
Yeah. And like Encanto and Lucas, like even though like out of those three that we had just mentioned, Mitchell's and the Machines, it has the most action. It's still very childish, or in the sense that it's very sensitive to children. It doesn't go push too far. Whereas Demon Slayer, it's not really written for children. It's written for the older age group because of with the amount of violence and gore that's in it. And I feel as though like with the Oscars, like they would still like put the animation in that box that like it's for kids. I mean, granted, we were able to see Spirit Away get the award some years ago, but Spirited Away can still pass for a kid film just because it talks about deep things, but it's still done or packaged in a way where it's digestible for children. I think like that's sort of why like it was able to be recognized that year, and why Demon Slayer is sort of just like thrown out the window this go around. Going on to my nerdy things that I did. I started watching Dress Up Darling because of you, and I can see the appeal, and I'm kind of hooked on it, begrudgingly, or at least I don't like to admit it. I haven't caught up on Vanitas. I was just hitting on Titan because I was just a bit surprised that that last episode didn't come out. I guess because, like you said, like it that earthquake that happened, I didn't realize that it had affected everything. I thought that with the way that Titan had ended, like we were going to wait for like a third part. I didn't know that we were going to get an actual final episode. You know, I thought we were going to get like a third part to, excuse me, the story, because at least like the way that the episodes were going, the last two episodes, it seemed like it was at a slower pace, and that there was going to be so much more left for the story to be told. So I like I it's sort of bittersweet for me when you said that the episode of Attack on Titan that's coming out this weekend is the last, because I finally get to see the story progress, but I feel like there's going to be too many loose ends for it to be a final episode in that regard. But I'll have to see the episode to see what's going to happen. And I have also been, I guess, just to wiggle my finger a little bit, I've also been playing with a new 3D printer that I have. Her name's Esma, and I have been printing all the geeky things. I have Spider-Man logos, and I'm currently printing a Cyberpunk Oni mask. So I don't know if I'm going to be using it for Halloween later on this year, but it was cool, and I have a printer now. So yeah, that's it has been fun, super de duper fun. And aside from that, I like looking into the spring anime. I had almost forgotten like some of the cool stuff that's supposed to be coming out this year. I want to say earlier this year or earlier in this season, I was sort of in a slump that there wasn't enough quote unquote good anime for me to sort of follow or to watch, or I was up to date on all of them, because I had been watching the Ranking of Kings, and I've been watching Bisco, but I feel like I've been sort of like falling out of that. And but aside from those two, there wasn't really anything else for me to watch or to have on in the background as I'm tinkering with Esma. So excuse me, after reviewing the upcoming anime for this year, I feel very, very rejuvenated for some of the newer stuff that we should be experiencing. What about you, Jay? What are your thoughts on some of the upcoming
I'll be very surprised if we have any similarities in common because this
anime?
is a yeah. Spring is usually like most stacked season. Winter is usually the ones where they want to like surprise the community with things like Attack on Titan did it previous year, or yeah, 2 years. Wow. Okay, so also something that's also kind of pissed me off recently, but I don't know when this was decided by the anime pope or whoever, or the president of the anime, but we're no longer calling them cores anymore. And it's like a very small, subtle change, but I think it's important for how we talk about like the plot progression of certain seasons because like this coming up season, there's a bunch of cores that are being called second seasons, but they're like so. For example, like the Ranking of Kings had 23 episodes, but that's two
Mm,
seasons of it instead of being
yeah.
considered one season. So, yeah, so we're going into this new season with a mixed bag of new seasons, also with cores that are called seasons. But I'm very shocked if we have any similarities on this list because there's a wide range of series going on. Like even idol shows are getting way more popular than they have in the past 5 years. Like there's about seven aside like from Idolish Seven and a couple of other named ones. But I'm looking forward to the season. I think this is going to be the most anime I watched.
Oh my goodness, yeah. And I'm trying to think like it's so instead of cores, what are they going to be calling the different breaks in between anime?
Exactly. They're just going to be calling them season one and season two. Yeah, it's like yeah. So like again, there's really no hard set rule or regulation about how many episodes are per season because in the
Yeah.
past 2 years we've seen like a season can be ended at 11 or it can be ended at 12 or ended at 13. But whenever that next season break is, or whenever they do take a season break, whatever that next part of it is going to be a season
Mhm.
two or season three. I mean, Attack on Titan kind of started it last year when they called it part one and part two because they wanted to be unique butterflies or whatever. But yeah, it's going to be odd going forward now because it's like 2021 is or 2022 is going to be the year we stop using the word core to describe seasons or second halves of a plot progression.
It's going to be a confusing time, but hopefully we'll get through it. Oh my goodness, it's ah why now I'm dwelling on it. But aside from that, it's I think it's time for us to go into our list, and I do want to say, or at least like mentioned as a bit of a side note, that in this upcoming season there is going to be a fourth season of the anime that we're reviewing today. The fourth season of Kingdom is actually going to be airing on no, for this spring 2022 anime season. So that's very very interesting. Having that in the back of my mind going into our anime review. So just maybe something that we want to touch on when we get to that segment of the episode. And Jay, would you like to regale us with the rules of Weebsketball once more, or should I?
Oh, yes, I can do it real quick. So, with any list that we make for an episode, we have a short exchange to do where you have a ruling of Kobe, Yeet, and Bench, where Kobe means it's higher up on someone else's list, Bench means it's nowhere on the other person's list, and Yeet is higher up on the list, Kobe is perfect spot. So, your five is
Mhm.
my number five, essentially. And we go back and forth with that. So, Sam, do you want to start with your number five if you rank them that way?
Yes, I'll go ahead and I'll start with my number five. And I sort of have, well, I have a backup just in case, because I know sometimes I would flip flop through my top five anticipated spring between anime that I have been following and anime that I haven't seen before. So for my earlier spots, or for the spots where I have anime that I've seen before, I have alternatives that I can switch them out and depending on which direction we're trying to go. But for so I'll just start out in one way. For my number 5, I have Rising of the Shield Hero season 2.
That's a bench.
Of course it is. Of course it is. But just to give the audience a little bit of a background on this series, basically, Rising of a Shield Hero is when we basically follow this person that gets isekai to this world where they have a calamity that happens every so often, every so many millennia, and they have to summon heroes from other worlds to come in and take one of 5 hero classes that they have. So like an archer, swordsmith, things of that nature. And we're following the person that inherits the role of shield hero. And the big hook in this show is that when this hero is summoned, this particular class is loathed and hated by everybody, essentially because of something that one shield hero did way back when. So now everybody who inherits the title of shield hero is basically kicked in the teeth as soon as they arrived and met with contempt. And it's about him basically trying to make his way in a world that summoned him and doesn't want him to be there. You get to see him grow in the sense of what he must become to sort of play the villain, even though he's not being a villain, and how he impacts people along the way, and how they in turn help him maintain the honest person that he is. So it's very, very fun. It's a, I would say, interesting take on isekai and the way that the story progresses. It was interesting as well. So I'm looking forward to it in that regard. Now, Jay, do you have any thoughts on Shield Hero, or you just want to go into your number 5?
Just that I leave all the sequel series off my list just because I want to highlight what's new coming up. But to talk about Shield Hero,
Mm-hmm.
it's funny that it came out kind of competitively with the Cautious Hero as well.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to see if Cautious Hero gets a second season as well because it was left off on one of those potential cliffhangers of, oh, there's places that the story can go. Uh, and same thing with Shield Hero because
Mm-hmm.
he, well, I don't have to read the ending, but it does feel like this might be a little bit unnecessary with how they end
Yeah.
season 1. But I love the promotion art for the season. Like they're facing a giant turtle mountain creature, and you see
Yes.
there's like new members to his his party,
It is
as
party.
well as returning favorites. But yeah, Shield Hero has a lot of humor and lightheartedness to it, but then shadowed against like the darkness of his situation. So it's a good
Mm-hmm.
series, good isekai.
I guess real quick, since you made your list without having sequel series, I'll go to my backup then, right? So I'll just speedball through this. I'll say the name and you can tell me if it's on your list. So my backup for my number 5 slot is Tomodachi Game. Is that on your list or
Uh,
no?
that's on my list.
Okay, so then we can talk about Tomodachi Game when we get to it. Boom. So now for your number 5.
Yeah, my number 5 is Awashi. Awashi.
Awashi?
Awashi. So it's spelled
Awashi.
Aoashi.
So that is a bench for me. I tell us a little bit about it.
So I talked about this a little bit last year with Blue Lock coming out later this year, and it feels
Oh,
like
yes. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I just now realized that I've seen trailers for this, but oh, okay. Continue.
yeah, it's very weird that we're getting 2 football anime this year that are done by this one, Awashi is being done by Production IG, and Blue Lock is being done by 8 Bits, I believe.
Hmm.
But yeah, Awashi is basically a story where a high school student basically blows his qualifying match to get into a good high school.
Yeah.
to be on a football team, and he basically catches the eye of a scouter from like one of the best football teams in Tokyo. And like I said, it's being done by Production IG, who has done Kurano Basket, Haikyuu, so they're kind of the sports anime studio. So I was looking forward to it, and even with how big a soccer team is, I think that's going to be the one detriment, because with any time with sports animes, you want to feel invested with individual characters and their personalities,
Mm-hmm.
but soccer teams are so ginormous, especially when you have to set up the opposing team as well, so it feels very genuine when they either win or lose against them. So this premieres on April 14th. It's based off of the manga, and it's pretty hype that we're finally getting like a good football anime, because there's been Haikyuu, there's been Kurano Basket, there's been Diamond no Ace, there's been Major Second for baseball. Even last year there was Pride of Orange for the first first hockey anime. So seems to be like that niche of genres with sports is going to be on the rise. So I'm looking forward to it. So this is one of my hopeful picks.
Okay, yeah, because I remember seeing trailers for this because Ao means blue in Japanese, and so every time I saw this name, I was always thinking, "Oh, this is Blue Lock," and then I would click on the video. I'm like, "This is not Blue Lock," but it's still about soccer. What is this? So I'm glad that you definitely gave me that awesome synopsis right there. So, as you said, like it's kind of interesting that we're going to be getting to sports animes, I think, because Blue Lock is supposed to be coming out this season, right? Or is it going to be coming out later on the year?
It's coming out this fall.
So it's not like they're going to be competing at the same time. So that's good. But at least, like, they're giving each other enough space so that they can, so that people can gravitate to whichever one that they feel like that they like the best. So no, that's actually pretty good. Um, So that was your number five. Would you like to give us your number four?
Yeah, so it was a slight yeet from earlier, but this is Tomodachi Game, or Friend Game, if you're talking about the translation.
Hey! And now that you mention it, I totally realize it's just hitting me now, like the little digital egg things, the Tamagotchis. I guess like it's just like it's either a variation of the word friend or they're using another word combined with the word friend. And I'm just now realizing like the pun or like what the thought that was behind the name Tamagotchi. So I'm sorry, I just had to have that little aside moment. But Jay, why has Tomodachi gotten on your number four?
Yeah, so this is probably the most generic premise on my list for the season, because it's basically a battle royale, bunch of friends get into trouble, and now they're facing off against each other. And the only reason why it's, I guess, low on my list in the fourth spot is because it's being done by, oh, this studio's name is so hard to pronounce, because why did they not just make it easy? But it's like Okuta Noburu, and they're the studio that did How Not to Summon a Demon Lord, which is a really
Oh,
underrated isekai, I think, in the community.
yeah.
Like, it's been overlooked because it does everything well enough. Like, a lot of people will say it's like mid, but I really enjoyed it. The season 2 was a little bit less attractive for some reasons. But yeah, they also are a new studio. They were founded back like 5 or 6 years, so this is only like their fifth or sixth property that they're handling. So I always keep my eye out on these new studios and see what they're doing, because you never know where a studio is going to land. Because their first anime that they got famous for was The Hidden Dungeon That I Only Know. I don't know if you remember that, but it came out like 2 years ago, I would say. And the gimmick of that show was just he's basically an ecchi protagonist, but there's like really outrageous scenes of like, oh, you need to relax, so let's make out. This is like these just absurd situations, and it's just like one of those cringe shows that you want to laugh at. So them going from that to How to Not Summon a Demon Lord to this being a battle royale where friends have to kill each other. So I was like, okay, I like that
Mhm.
progression. So let's see what they else have.
I'm not gonna lie, like that's sort of why on my list it was a little bit lower. It got me interested because of, as you said, the battle royale feel, and I want to say it's been maybe a year or two since we've seen a battle royale. I mean, there was Gleipnir, and as well as Battle in 5 Seconds, and there was another one that
Darwin's game.
came out, Darwin's Game, yes. But I want to say there was a year in between where we had like a year after those guys were released where we didn't have a battle royale game. It seems like this is the first battle royale game. Oh, sorry, battle royale show in resurging in the anime scene, and the fact that like the premise is also having to deal with money and having to manage quote unquote debt. It seems like there may be some influences from See Money that See the Power of Money that we had talked about before, or maybe they'll go more into the technical aspects, or they'll probably keep it generic. But I feel like I may feel a little targeted having being a college student with some debt myself, but we'll see how it goes moving forward. I'm very interested in it as it comes around. And on to me for my number four, I have Spriggan. And where is that on your list, Jay?
It's a bench.
Oh, really? We've been talking about Spriggan for some time. I'm kind of surprised that it was benched. But for the viewers' sake, this show is supposed to be airing on June 18th, 2022. Its studio is David Production. And the premise is essentially we follow this high schooler who works for this black ops agency and is supposed to, it seems like essentially be like Indiana Jones, where they are essentially working no, we're working together to search for these artifacts that are search for these artifacts against a competing entity. And I know we've talked about the different we've talked about it before with the different trailers and as well as the history, because this is essentially just a remake or retelling of the of Spriggan from, I think it was the 80s. So I don't think there's much more that we really need to say on it unless you have anything else that we need to say before we go on to your number three, Jay.
Just that I left it off my list as a matter of protest.
What?
Because one, I don't know the Netflix model. I haven't, done enough any
Yeah.
research into it, but Netflix is just going around dropping their anime properties whenever they feel like it, which is fine. But again, coming to the average anime fan and that watch it in seasonal intervals, you're going to put it at the very end of the summer, not even at the begin of fall. And it's like people are going to be like 9 episodes into their anime that they dedicated themselves to the season. And I left it off the list because it feels like Spriggan, they put it where they put it is because they probably don't have any faith in it. So I'm like, that feels like a red flag to me. Same thing like with the
Mm.
Tekken Bloodlines. I
Oh
forgot
yeah,
the
taking bloodlines. Mm-hmm.
yeah. Same thing how they're handling JoJo. I think they're releasing the second half of season 6 at the end of this year. I believe. I think that's the release schedule for that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it just feels like a red flag in the way of they're not confident that this is going to be an anime of the year contender. So I left it off my list for that reason.
Now that I think about it, I feel like with the dropping of Spriggan, I feel like it's more of a Western mindset, whereas it's June, it's more or less like the beginning of our traditional summer. So if anything, I think like they're like, oh, it's going to be a big summer hit, so they're just going to like drop it in summer and not really pay attention to the, as you said, the traditional anime airing schedule. So that could be the case, but with as much international dealings as Netflix does, they thinking back on it, it's probably like as you said, like they may not have that much faith in it, and it wouldn't. It would behoove me for them to totally neglect the anime airing schedule. But enough on that, and a little bit of your protest. But what's your number three, sir?
My number three is Shikimori is not a cutie.
I have seen trailers for that. I'm sorry, that's a bench for me. But please tell us a little bit about it, and why is that your number three spot?
Why ever the YouTube gods decided to talk about this anime, like just pick this anime out of everything that's premiering. This has had like the most views, I believe, on YouTube for the whole spring anime season, and it's just everywhere. It's just everywhere. It's just everywhere. This cute girl, pink haired girl, is just everywhere on people's timelines, and it's interesting because it's being done by Doga Kobo, who did they've done a couple of things, but most recently did one of the Star Wars Visions
Oh,
vignettes
okay.
or
Yeah.
series, but they've also responsible for one of your favorites, How Heavy Are My Dumbbells, as well as, last season's My Senpai is Annoying. They've kind of been like the Moe king for the past couple of years, like doing the Moe
Mhm.
aesthetic, keeping up like with A1 Pictures and Kyoto Animation. But yeah, it's really interesting that I fell into this hole of romance anime recently because my Dress Up Darling was last season. Last year was Miyamura, Miyamura,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
Horimiya.
Horimiya.
Yeah,
Horimiya.
and
Yeah.
the year and before that was Nagatoro. So like
Yep.
I'm
Naruto.
finding this trend of well put together romance animes that are like based off of light novels or mangas. So this seems to be akin to that. So I'm more likely to give it a chance, especially since it's following up My Dress Up Darling. But the base premise is that Izumi, the guy, is and his girlfriend are basically perfect together because Izumi is like a klutz. He's like just unnaturally lucky, and Shikimori is kind of his protector. But she goes from this calm, cool personality to this like badass. Essentially, that's kind of how the preview kind of sells it. And I was like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they're going to go hard into the personality disorder kind of side of that, but it does seem like it's going to be like a fun romp with, at least nice supporting characters and their dynamic is really cute. So I'm all game for that. And, I'm kind of in that mood of, oh, let me follow up something from Dress Up Darling. Let me get gushy gushy in the lovey dovey's, wubby wubbies. But yeah, that's my number three.
You want to have your lub dub feel something. I want to say like from what you said, from what I gathered from the trailers, it seems like it is a bit of a role reversal, like what we've seen in, but more of a traditional sense, because we got to see a bit of a role reversal in Nagatoro, but with this one, it's more traditional in the sense that it's not as aggressive. It's just that she is taking more of the masculine traits, or the more traditional masculine traits, in the sense of, as you said, that she's acting as a protector and she's doing all that, whereas he is playing the quote unquote damsel in distress role, where he's just in unlucky situations. And I guess like as a gimmick, it just doesn't grab me. It's like, okay, cool. I guess that's something. It just doesn't interest me. But if it's something that makes you want to, if it's something that embellishes or that enriches a romantic situation for you, that's your purview to watch it. So hopefully it's a good ride for you, and it's very very enjoyable as well. Now, on for my number three. Originally, it was Tiger Bunny season two, but as the president that we said before, we're not going to do any seasons. I would just say that learning that Tiger and Bunny season two is coming out this spring is making me go back and rewatch all of Tiger and Bunny from our previous episode that we've done on. But for my number three pick, I have Black Rock Shooter Downfall. And Jay, that's a bench. As you said before, it seems like so far we've only gotten one on our on our lists, which is Tomodachi. We'll see with the other two. And essentially, Black Rock Shooter will be airing April 3rd, and the studio. that is doing Black Rock Shooter is Beeberry Animation Studios and Beeberry CG, and essentially, uh, I am familiar with the Black Rock Shooter franchise. I don't know too much about it. I only know from the OG Black Rock Shooter, which was I think back in 2010, 2011, when it was first released, and it was basically following this girl who was having issues with one of her best friends. I think one of her best friends was about to move or something else like that. And essentially, it would flip flop between the real world and this alternate universe where essentially this girl with a gun for an arm is fighting these different monsters or these different machinations and ends up having to fight a big bad that resembles her best friend and basically represents physically represents their internal emotions that they are having to struggle with. And I remember that Black Rock Shooter was supposed to be an accompaniment to this big song that was coming out as well. And the animation was very well done, as well as the action and the emotional representation. And so when I found out that a new Black Rock Shooter was coming out, I was like, oh my, yes, I have to watch it. So that's why it's on my number 3 slot. So Jay, do you have anything to say on BlackRock before we go to your number 2, or just go on to your number 2?
Yeah, I can go right on to my number two. I'm completely
Okay.
unfamiliar with Black Rock Shooter. I know the image of the girl and her like character design, but that's
Mm-hmm.
about it. So I got some education from you about the premise as well. So I might have to go check that out since it's we might have to do it for a 10-year anniversary review soon. So yeah, that'll be interesting. Seeing this new season just came out as well as seeing it 10 years later for the first time. But yeah, my number two is this might actually be one that we share, but Summertime Render.
Oh, that is a bench. Tell me a little bit about Summertime.
Yeah, this is it should be my number one, but my number one I've talked about before, so that's kind of an obvious choice. But Summertime Render is basically being done by Studio O.W.W, which we've talked about plenty of times before, but they did most recently Comey Can't Communicate as well as Odd Taxi.
Mm-hmm.
So they're based. This is based off of a manga. It's premiering on April 15th, and it already has 25 episodes approved, so that's always a good sign. But this has so much ReZero vibes to it that I couldn't leave it off the list, as well as Sunny Boy vibes. It has a lot of vibes from other shows I'm familiar with, even from a video game that was like, oh, this is that video game. A video game called Oxenfree, which is basically a time travel story. So the premise of the anime is that a young man named Shinpei is basically called back to his royal hometown that's like isolated on an island after a tragedy has happened to one of his childhood friends. Oh, that sounds familiar. But the thing that really caught my eye about the premise is that when he goes back, it has consequences for himself, Japan, and the world. And I like how they phrase that. So there is a moment
What?
in the
Okay.
anime, there's the moment in the preview where he gets killed and it resets him to the moment he steps back onto the island. So, previews aren't really
Oh.
spoilers, but there's like a double ganger in the preview that shoots the person they're based off of. There's no there's no dialogue being spoken. It's not even has a narration except for some like few words of like that's so vague that you don't really get a sense of anything that's going on. It's just like a bunch of flashing images of creepy things happening. So it
Mm-hmm.
has like this very not Steven Spielberg, but it has this what am I thinking about? I'm thinking about old horror, 80s horror aesthetics of being trapped on an island, something's going wrong, and you have to figure it out. And you're also trapped in a time loop for some reason. So it has all these things that really attract me to a property. It's even classified as a sci-fi fantasy, or sorry, supernatural thriller. So there's going to be a core mystery to be solved. So I'm like, okay, I'm completely indebted to this off of this PV. So I'll be watching that.
Like the premise that you have of it, it reminds me of a video game that just came out. I think it's called Time Loop, where basically you're on an island for a full day and you die every day, and you have to essentially kill all the baddies before like the day ends. And it's like I said, the premise is just very, very similar, and I'm going to have to be on the lookout for now. Like, it seems very, very good, and I'm kind of surprised. I'm really surprised I didn't hear about it.
Your number two?
Yes, 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 yes. So my number two, my apologies, I had a brain fart for a second there. My number two is this is an anime that we've spoke about before, and thinking back on it, it may not be on your list, but I think I my number one might be the same as your number one. We'll have to see. But my number two is Spy X Family.
Bench.
Of course it is. But just a quick reminder for our viewers and our listeners. The air date for this series is going to be on April 9th, 2022, and the studios will be Studio Wit and Cloverworks, so people who've done Ranking of Kings as well as Black Clover. But the premise of this show is it's more of a comedy of errors of sorts, in a sense that we have this one spy guy who has to have this false family so that he can get in close to a mark of his that his organization has got him trying to influence. And his wife is, well, his quote unquote wife is somebody who is an assassin, and the child that they have, quote unquote, or have adopted, is a mind reader. And the reason why he has to have this family is because his Mark has a family, and he has to have his little girl go into school so they can get in closer. So that's the reason for the family. And it's just very, very interesting because each person in the family is trying to keep their secret away from everybody else. But it's just funny because the little girl is the only one who knows everybody's secret because she's a mind, or yeah, she's a mind reader. But because she's a little girl, she still misinterprets things as a child would, and so that's why you would get the sort of comedy of errors type thing. And the way that the comedy is done, it's I just really enjoy it. It made me go and read the manga, and I am looking forward to the anime. So, Jay, why don't we go to your number one to see how different our anime lists are?
Yeah, so I was pretty 100% certain you were going to pick Spy X Family, so I went with
Mhm.
the other Studio Wit production for the year with Vampire in the Garden.
Oh my goodness! Ah, I had just learned about Vampire in the Garden recently, but my number one is also another studio wit works. But okay, I'm sorry. Vampire in the Garden is my bench, but as I said, like I had just saw the trailer for it recently. Jay, why is Vampire in the Garden your number one?
Yeah, so we reported this, or sorry, I reported on this for a news story last year after watching Vivi, because I was so impressed with Studio Wit's animation in that. So I was like, oh, what else are they going to be doing following next year? So one that came out that they were going to do Spy X Family, and then Vampire in the Garden, and whatever that you're going about to talk about for your number one. But this is premiering on May 16th. This is actually an original property by Studio Wit. So again, putting it up on the list of why it's so high on my list. And it's also being produced by Netflix. So you know they got the money for it. So this falls into the genre of fantasy sci-fi. It's basically being produced by Netflix as well as Production IG. So like they have a lot of backing to it, and you know Production IG has their um, not handhold, grip on the sci-fi genre. So I was like, okay, another reason. And then the premise of the show is that a war has been raging between humans and vampires. Basically, humanity has lost, and their last bastion, or like their last civilization city, is built behind this giant wall of light. So you already get kind of the mythology or the lore behind vampires that they can't interact with sunlight. So a little bit more of the
Mm-hmm.
traditional vampire story. And one of the humans, whose name is Momo, or sorry, no, Fine. Fine, she's basically one of those pro-human, pro-vampires kind of advocates, kind of like in the mutant universe with X-Men. But yeah, we should coexist is her kind of campaign. And then she happens upon the vampire queen, Momo, who disappeared during the war because essentially, well, they don't spoil it in the premise, but it seems to be the fact that Momo also wanted the war to end and to coexist with humans. So Momo and Fine basically set out on an adventure to find basically a suitable place to basically reestablish relationships between humans and vampires. So I was like, okay, solid premise, solid backstory, good studio, so an original story idea from a great studio. So I'm like all game for that. But yeah, this on my list as number one.
Nice. It like sounds like a very solid premise. My only gripe is that the vampire queen's name is not Marceline or rhymes with Marceline, but that's just the old man in me being nitpicky. And looking back at my number one, because I'm looking at it closely, I thought that it was going to be a series, and just because it's an ONA, which is an online original animation, but like looking back on it, it seems like it's going to be more of a movie rather than a series. So I don't know if this should be on my list or not. But my number one pick was Bubble. Um,
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, it's a bench, obviously, because we're at the end of my list. But yeah, bruh, this thing is so beautiful. Like, there's like another anime that should get a animation nod at the Oscars. But yeah, what's the premise? Because all I know about it is it's about a bunch of parkour people.
no, no, essentially, it's set in Tokyo, and basically, uh, it doesn't really say like how it happened, but something happened in Tokyo to where the laws of gravity are wonky and they're cut off from the rest of the world. And essentially, it's about these kids who basically have these parkour battles against each other. And we're basically following this one guy whose style is just a little bit more edgy or more dangerous than the rest of them, and he runs into a mysterious girl who has powers. So I don't know if she has powers like the main protag in Gravity Rush, or but essentially, like from what we've seen in the trailers, it seems like it's going to be a mix of Gravity Rush and Mirror's Edge. But essentially, like it's about this the male protag and the female protag basically trying to figure out like what their relationship or what her relationship is with the phenomenon that's happening in Tokyo. And I'm assuming that we're going to uh, get like a more well, I'm not sure if it will even go that route in the sense of having like a big bad organization trying to follow the girl, because the promo images that we get from it, it's very lighthearted, and as you said, it's very beautiful and very hopeful. So it may just be like a relational thing between the two. And it's just very interesting. It seems like this year Studio Wit is coming out the gate swinging, because this if it's a movie or if it's an anime series, whatever it is, this work is from Studio Wit as well, and they are gunning after Studio Mappa with this work, bruh. It's crazy how good it looks.
Right. Yeah. Because I mean, Studio Mappa just had. I mean, they handled the Jujutsu Kaisen movie Zero as well as they have
Mm.
later this year Chainsaw Man. So it's like these two studios decided to pop off in the same time period and like be compared to one each other. But yeah, so this is a really interesting list. I knew like from the beginning we were going to have completely separate lists for a lot of different reasons. But yeah,
Mm-hmm.
along with these five that I'm going to be watching, I'm also interested in Kaguya-sama Love is War, which is its third season
Yep.
and potentially final season. We might end it with a movie potentially as well. There's Data Life, which I haven't been too much of a fan of, but it's season 4, so there's a great following of Data Life fans. And you already mentioned Shield Hero season 2, Komi-san season 2 as well. and to transition into Kingdom, season 4 of Kingdom. And that is a hard pivot because it started back in 2010 and now it's still continuing in 2022. So are you ready to talk about some Kingdom?
Yes, let's go ahead and let's head up Kingdom. So, time codes, descriptions below or around, wherever it is that you will be getting the time code descriptions. This episode is running a little bit long, but I think we can wrap it up fairly quickly. So, essentially, with Kingdom, we are. I would say this may be considered historical fiction because we are basically in the Warring States period for China, and we are within the Kingdom of Qin, and we follow these two orphans, Sin and Piao, in the beginning. Basically, them growing up within these Warring States period, and them wanting to make a name for themselves, and we basically follow the inner turmoil within this kingdom, and I guess expanding it to the rest of the warring states, seeing them trying to overcome this obstacle, this internal conflict, and then trying to subdue the rest of China throughout the rest of the series. And this franchise was done by Studio Pierrot, which has done notable works such as Tokyo Ghoul, Naruto, Bleach, and Black Clover. It's from a manga source, and its themes are historical and military. Its demographic is seinen, and its rating is rated R. And this work can be seen on Hulu, Funimations, as well as Crunchyroll. Now, Jay, up until this point, have you been exposed to Kingdom at all? Have you heard about this franchise, or are you familiar with it in any way?
Well, sorry, I didn't mean to laugh, but it's
Yeah.
weird that, we can talk about this anime now. It's 10 years old, celebrating its 10-year anniversary with its, season 4 premiering this season as well. But Kingdom has always kept pace with One Piece, and it's very odd that a lot of people have never heard of the series or franchise at all because it has over 74 volumes. It premiered back in 2006. The manga, sorry, it got published first in 2006. And it has like all these awards. Like it's like the third best selling in 2019, the second best selling in 2022, sorry, in 2020. So it's always been in like the top best selling circulation mangas in Japan for like the last 10 years. And it's funny that it's not widely talked about. I mean, the anime itself has over 100 episodes, and like the first season itself was budgeted for 38 episodes, so there was a lot of faith in the
38?
series.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
Yeah, it's a weird breakdown. Like season 1 is 38, season 2 is 39, season 3 is 26. So, however they decided to break up these seasons, it's not constrained by the usual budgeting that we are used to with anime production. And it's like, why is this one series that no one talks about is just so breaking every standard that we know to be true for anime? And even with its first season, its 30 episodes is heavily dependent on 3D CGI.
Mm-hmm.
It's very much akin to what we talked about in Berserk, that it's very dated and jarring, and even with all that going on, there's still 100 episodes of it, and I think that's the one negative of it. But just to wrap it back around to your question, but I'm very familiar with this because the manga is so five-head about military tactics and strategy that I didn't think it would be possible to adapt it. And going back to 10 years ago, it definitely wasn't the time to adapt it as well. So I was very curious to put this on the list, and I thought this was my choice for that reason. But it's so interesting that this military epic is like Light and L playing chess, but everyone is Light and everyone's Light and Light and
Everyone's
L
light
playing
now.
chess. Yeah, it's like just weird. It's like, how can you play 5D chess with 10 people that are equally skilled and it still be entertaining. It never gets
This
boring.
sort of
But
reminds me of that meme. I don't know if it's a meme or if it's an actual thing. Like I would see like a circular chessboard that has like 5 or 6 different kings and queens, and like everybody's just trying to attack or trying to win the game board. But I know like I have tried to watch this before, or I've seen images of it, or at least mainly just like the stills, and the premise seemed pretty interesting. I've tried to watch this before, but the jankiness of the animation, it just killed it for me. And I know that I wanted to put this on the list because this was a bit of a my pick as well. So I guess like we were in each other's head about this. I wanted to give it a chance because I didn't know why I wanted to give it a chance, but I think that because it seemed popular for a reason, and I wanted to see why. In the first episode, one thing that sort of rocked me, and I've told you about this several times, is like the first episode is damn near an hour. I wasn't expecting it, and even before I realized how long that it was, the feel of the show was that we were watching an epic, right? It opens up with these two orphans and how it explained everything. I really liked the explanation for the warring states because I'm not familiar with Chinese history or anything along those lines. So that was nice getting a bit of a background on what was going on in China at that time and how many kingdoms were trying to were vying for power, things of that nature. And watching these two young men again, like I said, like it feels very very epic that you're going to be on this long road and this long journey to see these two characters actualize themselves. The only thing that I didn't like about it was just like I'm going to be in it with this CGI for the long haul and just like sloughing through everything. It's just like, oh, why? Why? But if it wasn't for the CG, it would be very well done. And as you said, like with Berserk, it would hop back and forth between CGI and the hand drawn stuff. And it would just make me mad because the hand drawn stuff was pretty good. And it's just, I guess it's one of those things where it's like they were trying to push the boundaries of CG at the time. So it may have just been like a growing pains of CG within the anime medium. But oh my goodness, talking about growing pains, it's just ugh. But enough of the technical stuff. You had mentioned that with Kingdom, it's just very tactical heavy, and it's like seeing everybody play 5D chess. But when we are following these characters, their age isn't really given, but they're assumed to be preteens, like maybe 12 or 13, just on the cusp of adulthood or teenage years. And I would say like that was one thing that was sort of a negative for me in the sense that because both of these characters, Zen and Piao, their goal essentially is to become great renowned generals for their strength as well as their tactical skills. And with one of the characters, he's very very strong, but his tactics aren't up there with his strength. He is probably the dummy out of the two. And I guess my question for you, Jay, since you're more acquainted with it, is that with this show, like, do we get to see him, or like with this franchise, do we get to see him grow and adopt different tactical wisdom, tactical experience, or like him exhibiting his know-how? Would that be much later on when he's older, or is he going to be a dummy throughout the entirety of the franchise?
given the first 3 episodes, like again, you warned me that it was going to be 50 minutes, and I actually watched it at twice the speed. And it's very odd that it does fit the story a lot better that way. You get a sense of, they mentioned like in the first episode that the two boys have been fighting
Mm-hmm.
or they've been sparring over 1,000 times. and you get to see Shin put his his practicing skills into real life when he's like taking on bandits, but he's using a wood sword, even though he has a real sword on his back. But for how long the manga is, and again, coming up on its fourth season, it does make sense that he does become, the general that he plans to be. And like one of his dream is to be basically the greatest general under heaven, which is this is a true story. Again, it's not too terribly fictional. It does lend into some fictionality with like certain characters to make the plot a little bit more interesting, but there is a lot of attention to detail for being a Japanese production of Chinese history. You think there would be a little bit of racism, or misappropriation of culture here, but to my knowledge, a lot of it is accurate to the manga and how much attention the mangaka gave to representing the Chinese people at the time, as well as the politics, the histrionics as well. So Shin does grow into his own sense of his own idea of what it means to be a general, kind of like how we talked about what it means to be a king in Fate Zero. And it's really endearing because I think that's why they spend so much time, or at least why the first episode was 50 minutes, is because you want to get endeared to Shin as a character. There's not much to dislike about him, but you definitely see his ambition and drive to be a general. And even though he's a slave, again, not only a orphan, but he's a slave working in a household for, some head of a village. And even there's a very touching scene with that family in the middle part of the first episode. And then there's some, and like at the end of the first episode, there's like introduction to like this assassin, which is like not too mystical, but there's also like this giant guy that squashes someone against a brick wall. So like it does earn its mature rating, but it seems to be a earnest story about Shin as a character. So I think there's a lot of parallels between him and Guts. So I'm glad we were able to structure the schedule between the Berserk episode and this one.
I can see that with again, like with what I know about Guts and like Guts' backstory. Oh my goodness, he was hit hard with the Charlie Brown beat stick. But even in the Golden Egg movie, we don't get a sense of how bad his childhood is. Like we are given hints, maybe, and the audience has to do a lot of legwork on their part if they don't know much about the story. I would say with this one, this franchise is more or less cut and dry because both Zin and Piao, they mentioned that they were orphaned because of the warring state. So they are literally a byproduct of the time. They are literally a product of the time that they live in, and they are doing their best to overcome everything in order to better themselves. I it's just very funny, like now that I think about it, just the different characters that are depicted in the show. And even though you say that Zen is that there's nothing to really hate about him, I still have sort of problems with him because it's just like, bro, how dumb can you be? Because I'm not sure it. Even though it's in like the first three episodes, I don't think it's really considered a spoiler. But like with the way that we've talked about it, we've treated it as such. Do we want to? Because with one of the two, something does happen. Do we want to give a spoiler warning before we go into it, Jay, or do we want to just go into it since it's within the first three episodes?
Yeah, you can just go into it.
Okay, so essentially, with what happens to Piao, he gets snatched. He gets not snatched, but he gets recruited by a general of the king because he's passing by him and Zen as they're sparring, and he's like, "Oh, your sword skills are great." It's like you would have be a great addition to the palace, but I just need you. And later on, we see that Piao, what we learned that Piao was taken because his likeness to the king is very, very close. Like they're basically doppelganger twins of each other, and he was used as a double. And when Zen realizes this, of course, he's going to break down, and he's not going to want to. He's not going to wish it to be true or anything else like that. But it's just like leading up to that point. I don't know. It again, it just doesn't make me like him because again, he acts like really. I don't know if it's because of him losing his friend is making his mind be in disarray. I want to give him that benefit of the doubt because I feel like I've lost people before, and sometimes like my mind goes blank and I'm not thinking straight either. But it's just a bit surreal because it's like it's literally watching somebody play or watch Dora the Explorer and not really getting that she wants them to say two or wants them to say that Swiper is behind her when she knows that Swiper is behind her, but for some reason the person watching Dora doesn't see Swiper, and it's just like it was just grueling for me trying to see Zen connect the two dots that Piao was a double. And it was just funny to me when the king that he runs into, Ying Zhang, how so like Zen has like this big emotional speech and he's like, so that's what happened, that's why you chose Piao. It's like that like he's just a double just so that you can live on. And then Ying Zhang's just like, yeah, that's why exactly why we chose him. It was just matter of factly and just like deadpan and just straight into the point. And it was like, just cut through Zen's uh dramatic intensity within the situation. I just found that funny, and seeing those two play opposite of each other, it's just been very, very well. And I don't mean to soapbox and just shit on Zen this entire time. Again, like I said, he just literally lost his childhood best friend in front of him. And I can understand why his mind is in disarray. But when you had mentioned that we're seeing people play 5D chess, but like seeing him in that moment taking so long to connect the two dots that Piao was just taken as a double, it just it makes me feel some sort of way, Jay. But aside from that, like I would say like please give us some positive aspects of the show, or at least help us highlight some more positive aspects of the show, because I don't want to get in the zone for too much longer, because I know there's probably some good that I hadn't seen through my lens of the bad CG and how dumb Zen can be.
When, like, to again talking about the three
Yeah.
episode test, the wrap up to the three episodes is that Shin decides to work for the king and to
Mm-hmm.
basically go through the route that um, like the most shortest route possible, because he's like throwing his hat into this. There's a lot of politics going on in the background of this. Is that, again, warring kingdoms, the seven provinces of the warring state period in China, and that right now in the province of Xing is that the two brothers are basically battling for the throne, because basically what happens in a lot of feudal stories is that the king has multiple children from multiple wives, so they have to fight for the legitimacy of the throne. And the younger brother,
as all good fathers do.
yeah, even in ranking of kings, haha.
Yes.
It's just the younger brother, is so evil, like evil to the way of like pure bloods, Draco Malfoy and the Malfoys in Harry Potter kind of purity kind of thing, of like
Mm-hmm.
the idea of God on the throne is what the ruling king should be, that they should have pure blood. But all that's kind of not swept over, but is running in the background essentially. And with the end of the three episodes, you get the idea that yes, Shing sees that this king upstart, not he's not upstart, but he's the rightful ruler, did get his best friend killed, but he can't do really much about it. Like, he can't get revenge, essentially. He has to get revenge by basically conquering all of China. And that's kind of how he
Mm-hmm.
processes his grief. Even when his friend dies in his arms, he basically runs his head through a barn side door and starts banging his head on the ground until it bleeds. And that's the kind of character Shin is. He's like, he's the right hand man. He's the knucklehead. He's the not stupider version, but he's the one that's the muscle. He's the guts of the Griffith kind of comparison, if you want to wrap it back around. So, like, I was
Mm-hmm.
never mad at how emotional he was responding to any situation, or how much outburst that he gave in any kind of ordeal. It was kind of like the light and the darkness to the coin. So I was like, oh my god, I see guts in Griffin here. And it's done on like a childish level. It's like done through the
Yeah.
lens of how a child would process grief and how they would have to get over it. But they do set that up at the very beginning of that. Like you said, Sam, it's like they're war orphans. Like, after seeing a battle of thousands of people dying, they're like, oh, I want to do that kind of thing. And it's like, okay, you kind of get their mind frame, but what happens when
Mm-hmm.
it's personal? When does warfare become personal to the general leading? Like, when do you become calculus or callous in your command? So that's what
Yeah.
that moment that you were talking about, when he finds out that he was just used as a body double, because the prince already knows that. That's what royalty does. They know how to calculate the cost of human life. So even in those small moments, I think there's a lot of personality in the first 3 episodes, and seeing the strength that he has at the beginning, but showing that he has this lack of intelligence or stratagem going on, that he's not the one that should be the general. But there's like a really touching saying of like, oh, now we're one soul. I've gone to heaven, but I'll wait for
Mm-hmm.
you to become the greatest general. I'm like, oh my god, it's so sad. Kind of moment. And I was like, okay, I can get behind this. So if we're going to give a ruling of to rebury or to resurrect, I'm giving it a resurrect. But how about you?
I was in the Reberry camp, and I really like the Guts and Griffith comparison that you have. Because essentially with King Ying Zhang, he definitely resembles a young Griffith, and even in their interactions, we see Zen give Ying Zhang some common sense, at least like while they're in the fray of combat. So he does have a good tactical sense when he's in the fray, but when he's outside of it, he seems like a like you said, the typical knucklehead. And my only complaints was that he wants to be a general, but he obviously doesn't have the aptitude to be a general. If anything, like you said, he'll probably be like the best fighter along those lines. But it would be interesting to see how he grows. So, and with as you said, the acclaim that the anime has, I would I would like to resurrect it with a caveat, because just the jankiness of the animation. If anything, update the CG to where it looks a little bit like the Saint Seiya animation that we would see on Netflix, where at least it looks like maybe PlayStation 2 graphics, something along those lines. Because it's at least like for me, it was taken away from the story, and I couldn't really engage myself or lose myself to the story, because it definitely plays itself like an epic. So I would at least do that. And as we said before, it has a season 4, so it doesn't really have like a bearing on our verdict, but at least now the audience knows where we stand on this franchise. And that is a bit of a wrap up from us today in regards to the franchise known as Kingdom. We have a resurrect from Jay, and we have a resurrect with a caveat for myself. And with that, we will be getting prepared for another military anime for our next episode, known as Jormungand. And that's another pick of mine, and I'm fairly interested to see what that one's going to be about, because I've only seen stills of it, but I haven't really watched anything up until this point. Now, Jay, do you have any final thoughts before you give us what you have to say today?
Oh yeah. Again, I think it's just one of those things of not understanding how popular this franchise is, because
Mm-hmm.
there had been like, well, the second movie is actually coming out this year, as long as
Oh, they have
beside
movies for
the,
Kingdom.
yeah,
Okay.
for the season 4, but there's a live action film, and even how they handled the first film, it was actually done by a production company in China. So it's like there's a lot of love for the series, and
Mm-hmm.
it's like one of those things of how did something start out so janky become so beloved? And I think it just is a credit to the story. So I
Yeah.
think after watching these 3 episodes and seeing that there's a season 4, there's a lot of material to go back over, that I'm probably going to pick up the manga for the first time in a while and like start reading it. So I'm looking forward to that, and like I'm glad the anime at least inspired that kind of vibe with me.
No, no, that's good. And like you said, maybe oh, since you said that the manga is really good, maybe this is one of the cases where I just pick up the manga and I love the franchise and I just can't watch it because as you said, as we both said before, this story has that very epic feeling and because it's so close to one country's history, I feel as though there's going to be a lot of respect for it. And as you said, like there's a lot of love for it. So that just reflects the amount of respect that they have for the source material or the story that they're trying to tell. So I would say like there's probably some good in the franchise. I probably just need to look at it in a different format.
Well, I got one more piece. If you, I don't know if this is going to sway you to invest in 3 seasons, which is potentially like short of 100 episodes, but your boy Hiroyuki Sawano comes on as music composer for season 3.
And remind me who what songs he's done again? Hiroyuki.
He does all the Gundams. Sorry, but he's done the soundtrack for what we've talked about on the podcast is Gundam Unicorn. But yeah, Sawano comes on
Oh.
for, I guess, he's I guess most known in the West for doing Attack on Titan, and some other big names Sawano drop music.
Ooh.
But yeah, if you want
Okay.
to talk about another positive potentially to the epicness of his musicality and adding that until season 3, and he's also coming on to season 4. So
Ah, I have to slough through season 2. Good thing everything is in English, so I can just have it in the background. No, that's very good to hear. Very, very tempting. So I may just go back and rewatch it so that I can hear my boy give me some good music to some questionably uh questionable animation. So aside from that, Jay, what have you got for us today?
all right, so I'm going to close on some more. I think I've done this maybe 2 times before, but I want to do some close. Sorry, not close, but do some flat karaoke. So I'm going to read out some song lyrics. See if you can guess the song name. War. What is it good for? Absolutely nothing. Listen to me. Oh, war I despise, because it means destruction of innocent lives. War means tears to thousands of mothers' eyes when their sons go off to fight and lose their lives. I say war.
Good God, y'all.